Welcome back to Home Theater Gurus episode 3. The last few episodes we went over laying out the bed layer, with the first one getting really down and dirty into the different tolerances and how to calculate them, and the second one giving you the string method, something really easy and quick you can do to get everything laid out optimally. So now we're going to add some Atmos speakers to that bed layer. So first of all, we're going to give a little brief description of what Dolby states, or how the characteristics of the Atmos speaker should be in relation to the rest of the room. So, okay. The overhead speakers should complement the frequency response, output, and power handling capabilities of listener level speakers. Choose overhead speakers that are timbre matched as closely as possible to the primary listening level speakers. So, there's a lot of myths out there that the Atmos channels, they're no big deal. Just put any old thing up there. You can have whatever you have on the bottom. The tops don't have to match. There's no need for them to be similar. Throw some in walls straight down and you'll be fine. Now, while that is, kind of true in a way that it will be better than nothing, it's not recommended in any way. I mean, ideally, you would have bookshelves all around the room for the bed layer, and the same exact bookshelves would be mounted on brackets for the top speakers, and also for your front and rear heights if you had those. You would have identical speakers all the way around the room. And that would be like the no compromise best setup possible. Of course we can't always do that, but that would definitely be, the best outcome and have the best sound system of that nature. So now we're gonna go over where to put our Atmos channels and the channels that are gonna lift the objects from that bed layer. Alright, so our options, well, first of all, this is the same room we had before. It was a 14 by 18. Here we're looking at it from the side, 18 foot, 9 foot ceiling. So I got my little guy here reclined in his chair. He's 11 feet back. And the distance from the floor to his head is 3 feet, which is pretty standard in most rooms in a recliner. So we'll put that over his head there. And again, all this is to scale. And you can see from the ceiling down to the center of that blue circle is 6 feet. So that's the distance from his head to the ceiling. So here is our zero plane, and this would be where our LCR are sitting right there. In our rear, you see they're a little bit above because we can move them up to 1.25 times the height of the LCR. So they're up a little bit. In our surround, I didn't put it there because it would block the little guy, but the surround's right there, sitting in that intersecting line right here in the room. So this is 0 degrees, and this is 90 degrees. So our Atmos speakers, we've got different options. We can have front heights, which are 30 to 45 degrees. Now that is based off of the 0 line. So we've got front heights, we've got top fronts, we've got top middles, we've got top rears, we've got rear heights. Now all of those speakers are options we can use to lift from the bed layer. So we're going to break this into two parts. The first one is going to be just a quick, not really any calculator work you have to do. It's just going to be quick, real easy to figure out where you can put them. And then after that, I'm going to make a recommendation where I think they should be, and there's going to be some small calculations you're going to have to do to figure that out. First thing we're going to do is say this is a 5, let's do a 7.1.4. So we've got our 7 on the bed layer. We're going to add a top front and a top rear. Now, to find 45 degrees, which is pretty much the center of the recommendation, all we have to do is measure up to the ceiling, and then we're going to go from that point forward the same amount. So say this right here, this is 6 feet to the ceiling. So at 6 feet up to the ceiling, we're going to go 6 feet forward and 6 feet back. So that's pretty easy. That's where our speakers will go if they were in ceiling. Now if you notice, when you have a speaker on a bracket, the point, just like with the episode 1 and 2, we need to go off the acoustic center of the speaker. So it's going to be on a bracket, and it's going to be aimed, hopefully. Now this will be covered in the next episode, But ideally, you will not be using in-ceiling speakers, not if you want good quality sound and Atmos to your seating area. So this is on a bracket, so we need to measure down. Okay, so this is a foot. We're actually a foot from the ceiling. So even though this is a 9-foot ceiling, we need to go 8 foot, because it's going to be from the floor to here is 8 foot. From the floor to our head is 3, so we're actually 5 feet from the line, and we can use our little yarn just to kind of give you a visual. Let's see, center to center of the speakers, the acoustic center is a foot below the ceiling there. So instead of going 6 feet, because we're not 6 feet, we're 5 foot from the acoustics, that line cutting across the acoustic center of the two speakers. We're going to go 5 foot forward and 5 feet back. So, and again, that's not going to be, that doesn't mean your mount goes at 5 foot forward. That means the center of this speaker goes at 5 foot forward from that line. So you might have to measure your speaker, kind of determine once you get your toe in and it's angled towards the seating area about how far forward is that acoustic center going to be from your mount, because your mount's going to be back here somewhere probably. And the same thing for this speaker. We're going to go 5 feet back. And there we go. We'll put our little mount right there. Alright, and both of those are aimed towards the listening position. Alright guys, this is going to be the little more advanced version from what we just did. Because if you notice here, we've got 45 degrees between these two speakers and 45 between these, because these were positioned at 45 degrees from the center here. So that leaves a 90-degree gap right here, which is a really big gap to fill without a 9.1.6, which if we had that type of processor, we could place a center right here, a top center. But because we don't have that, we can close these up a little bit. We have a tolerance for the top front that's between 30 and 55 degrees. So if we were to go to the extreme at 55 degrees, that's 55 from this 0 right here, that would get us 35 degrees off of this straight ahead 90-degree angle. So all we have to do is find the distance again from our acoustic center from our speaker to our head, which we determined that's 5 feet down. We can multiply 5 times 0.7. So that gives us 3.5 feet. So with that, we can simply move our speakers back towards that center 90-degree line to 3.5, and the same thing behind us, because the angle, it's pretty much a mirror of itself, or it is a mirror of itself from front to back. 3.5 forward and 3.5 back. So we can move our speakers there. And now, if we were to kind of draw some lines to it here, get rid of this one, you see now we've closed that gap up right here quite a bit. And that's going to be a lot easier for these speakers to pan. As a matter of fact, now this is 70 degrees instead of 90. It's not the 60 like we had on the bed layer, but we want to stay within the constraints or what Dolby recommends. So that's why I didn't advise you, or I don't advise to go any closer than that. You know, we don't want to shoot for the 30, because then it's, oh, we're out of recommended placement. But anyway, so this is what we're going with right here. So that's going to cover the 7.1.4. But let's say you don't have enough room for rears. So you've got a 5.1 bed layer. Your surrounds here are pulled back a little bit on the bed layer. You're still going to have them lifted up 1.25 times the height of the LCR. But now if this is all we have was a 5.1.2 with 2 Atmos speakers, you see the tolerance, even though they recommend 90, the tolerance can be up to 65. And with the 5.1, you'll often see the diagrams have it a little forward. And so you can, and I'm going to have the tolerances there, they are right there. So you can actually pull that forward, but there's no real reason to only have a 0.2 system if your processor can handle more channels. You can have your top middle and your top front at 45 degrees. The only problem is a lot of receivers or processors for some reason will not let you have a top middle and a top front. But we can still do it, because if you notice the top height, or I'm sorry, top front and the front height speaker, the tolerances are basically the same. The front height is 30 to 45 degrees off of this line, and the top front is 30 to 55. So 45 actually works for both of them. But Dolby does recommend that the front height speakers be on the front wall, not the ceiling, but they do allow you to put them on the ceiling if you must. So if we were going to find 30 degrees, which is actually what they recommend for a front height, so we're going to take the distance from his head here to a speaker that's aimed down. It's going to be a little bit more towards the wall, but I mean, it's so close you could just go off of the main baffle, assuming the speaker is going to be the same distance once it has a bracket on it. So you're going to measure bracket plus speaker here from your head to the front of the baffle, and let's say that's 11 feet. We're going to take that 11 feet and we're going to multiply it times 0.577. So 11 times 0.577 is 6.34 feet. So we're going to measure for my LCR, which is on the 0 line, and we're going to go up, what was that? 6.34 feet. Now that is right at the ceiling here. I mean, really, we don't have quite enough height to put it there. If this guy was just a little bit closer, then it would actually bring it down some, but being right there, we really don't have enough room to put it on this front wall like it should ideally be. So we can come off of the ceiling. And if we're going to do that, we're going to measure again, head to baffle. We're calling it 5 feet. So just keep in mind, when we're using the front wall, we're using this reference, the baffle hanging on the front wall to his head. When we're going to find anything on the ceiling, we're going to have to use this reference here, from the ceiling, hanging on the ceiling down to the head. So we're going to go 5 feet times 1.73. So 5 times 1.73, 8.65. So we're going to come from 90 and go 8.65 feet forward, and right around there. Okay. So now that is 30 degrees, and that's where Dolby recommends that that speaker be placed. Of course, it's not on the front wall, but in this situation, that's just where it's going to have to go. And the rear will be the exact same thing. It's just a mirror of the front. So if you wanted to have a rear height, you could use the same formula, just turn everything around. Now, Dolby also states that these top speakers need to be 2 to 3 times the height of your LCR. So if these are 3 feet right here to the LCR, you want your tops to be anywhere from 6 to 9 feet. Of course, you really can't be too high, so I'm not sure why they just didn't give a minimum. But, so I mean, even in an 8-foot ceiling, they'll work. But now, okay, so now here we are looking overhead. And same thing, our 14 by 18 room. We're sitting 11 feet back, and we've got a 7-channel bed layer. So we just learned that 45 degrees would be, we're 5 foot from the baffle of the speaker on the ceiling, so it's 5 foot forward and 5 feet back. So let's go ahead and mark where that's at from this overhead view. Now, if you're in your room doing this, you may be laying this out on the floor and then take a plumb bob or something and let it drop down to find the exact point where you need to be. So, okay. So now we need to find out how wide they need to be. Now, Dolby has it's a little confusing here because they kind of spec 2 different things. They give you a tolerance, and that tolerance is, let's see, I've got it over here, 30 to 60. Yeah, 30 to 60 degrees. So they give you a tolerance of 30 to 60 degrees, and 45 is actually what they recommend. So if we're 5 feet up, we can go 5 feet over this way and 5 feet over that way. So, but there's a problem to that. And the problem is, say you've got a 12-foot ceiling. Here we had a 9-foot ceiling, so Instead of 5 foot from our head to the top of those speaker baffles, it may be 8. So now, you know, we're going 8 foot this way, but the room is not big enough. You know, it's only 7 feet to the sidewall. So they also give you another spec that the speaker should be no greater, the width of the separation should be no more than 0.5 to 0.7 times the layout width. So that's going to be kind of our constraint. So we'll be 10 feet apart here because we're going 5 feet forward, 5 feet left and right, you know, with this ceiling height. But if we were going to go with 0.7 times the width of the layout, now the layout, they actually use basically the surrounds from baffle to baffle, which is, we'll say 12 feet. So 12 times 0.7 is 8.4 feet across. Now, let's see. So we're gonna call it 8.5. All right. So that's gonna place a speaker there and there, and then the same thing back here. So you have a speaker there and there. So I'm not sure why they have this conflicting information in there, but they have a statement in there. They're trying to keep the Atmos channels over your head as much as possible. So I mean, it does make sense with a tall ceiling, even though the angles are going to be the same. 45 degrees is 45 degrees. I guess they're just trying to keep them more constrained over your head. So that's what we're going to go with, is the 0.7 for the maximum width. Oh, and just to kind of back that up there, if you look at Home Theater Geeks episode 170, episode 233. 233 has Anthony Germano, I think is his name, and he's a pretty high-end home theater designer, and he goes over Atmos setup, and he even comments that he doesn't agree with, sometimes we'll see the Atmos in line with the mains, and he actually prefers to pull them in too, and it does make a lot of sense. You get a little sidewall reflection off of these sidewalls that are going to help too, but I mean, it should, that's what they recommend, so that's what we're going to go with. So, all right. Okay, the front heights, if they are on the wall, Dolby recommends that they be in line with the mains. Now, of course, if you have to put them on the ceiling, you're going to be bringing them in because you're going to be constrained by that 0.7 width. Same thing for the rear height. All right, so I think that is pretty much it for the general layout. So guys, some of you may be wondering, why didn't I bring up in-ceiling down-firing speakers like coaxials and things like that? So we're actually going to look at that in the next episode. We're going to look at a popular DIY speaker. We're going to look at some on and off axis responses, and we're going to explain or kind of go over how those responses or how those graphs are going to equate to actual listening in a room as you sit in the different seats and get further and further off axis. And I actually have the speaker in my room, so we're going to go over it, take measurements in my room, look at the type of responses that I'm getting compared to on axis, and we're going to take some SLP readings and look at the variations in different seats. So that's it for this episode of Home Theater Gurus. I'll see you guys next time.